This is Greg Pass with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is June 12th, 2022, and I have the pleasure to sit down virtually with Scott Boatright. Scott is in Florida right now. We're doing this online. Scott, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Scott, can you tell us your full name and where you were born?
Scotty W. Boatright. Scotty Wayne Boatright. Was born in Kingsport, Tennessee, in 1947.
And do you have any veterans in your family?
My dad was in World War II. He was a military police officer in Cambridge, England, for a couple years. And my uncle was in World War I. I had two first cousins in the Korean War. So,
did that play a role in your enlistment, or were you drafted, or how did you enter into military service?
I enlisted a week after high school. After graduating from high school, I enlisted in June of 1965. That's when I enlisted.
What was your motivation?
Well, Vietnam War was starting, and I knew I was probably going to get drafted, so I might as well just enlist. So that's what I did. And a friend of mine, I joined for jump school. I was going to go to jump school after AIT, and it didn't play out so well. So I ended up going straight to Vietnam after AIT.
And why did you choose the U.S. Army versus the other branches?
Because my dad was in the Army. You know, I had several. My cousins were in. One was in the Navy, but and I had another cousin was in the Army, also 101st. So,
gotcha. So I'm going to make an assumption that basic training was a lot different back in the 1960s than it was when I went through. So tell us a little bit about your experience in training, and then your specialized training that followed after that.
So when I went to basic, graduated from basic, and after basic, I was chosen to go to leadership school. And so leadership school lasted like 2 weeks, and you do everything, you learn everything in 2 weeks that you're going to do an AIT, and they make you a squad leader for AIT. So that way you can help other soldiers, you know, help them know what to do, weapons and whatever else, you know, you were doing. So, and then I was supposed to go to Fort Benning. And what happened was, as soon as I graduated from AIT after going through leadership school, they sent me straight to Vietnam. I got there in December the 4th, 1965, arrived in Vietnam.
How old were you at the time?
18.
18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it like being an 18-year-old kid heading off to Vietnam? What thoughts are going through your head, and what did your family have to say about that?
I think my mom was more worried than my dad, you know, because we lived on a farm. So I was the oldest. My brother was much younger. He was 12 years old. So I did have to do a lot of the farm work. So it was probably a little bit burden on my dad because I was leaving. So, but you know, so.
How'd you get over to Vietnam?
How to get over there?
Yeah.
Flew over there. See that? Was that the question? How to get there?
Yeah. So how'd you get there? You say you flew, and where did you land, and what were your first impressions when you got in country?
Well, we stopped in Hawaii on the way over, and I think Guam. I can't remember where else we stopped. I flew out of San Francisco, so I went from Georgia. I was in Fort Gordon, Georgia, where I went to basic and AIT. Fort Gordon, Georgia. So I flew to San Francisco first, and then from there on to Vietnam. And so when I first got there, when I first arrived in Vietnam, you'll actually stop in Saigon at the Tan Son Nhut Air Base and Camp Alpha. That's where you're processed in through the country, wherever you're going. So I went right near Bien Hoa Air Force Base, a place called Long Binh. Is where the 1st Division was. Now the 1st Division, Big Red 1, was the very first division in Vietnam. They got there on July the 12th, 1965. the division did, and half of them went to Vung Tau, which is on the South China Sea, and the other half went to Cam Ranh Bay. I mean, it was part of the 2nd Brigade. So that's units that I got connected to after I got processed through Camp Alpha.
Gotcha. So let's take a step back and look a little globally. For somebody who might be watching this video who's not familiar with the war, tell us in 1965 what America's role was in the war. How were things ramped up at that time? You indicated that you were the 1st Division there. Tell us a little bit globally about American conflict.
When I was there, it hadn't ramped up at all. I mean, it was kind of it was dangerous, obviously. First of all, you get there, number one, you sleep in tents, sleep on a bunk, not a bunk, but a cot inside of a malaria tent, whatever, because malaria was kind of for mosquito netting that you slept in. And so it was interesting. It was hot. It was really hot when I first got there.
So are you attached to local units at this point, or is it?
No? As soon as I left Camp Alpha, I was attached to headquarters company, Recon. I was in a Recon unit, and we had I think 4 gun jeeps. And so the Recon unit, what we did, we pulled security for headquarters company wherever we were on different operations throughout the country. So basically, when we were at base camp, what we did, we used our gun jeeps to run escorts with trucks into Saigon, picking up supplies and that sort of thing. And so we did that for, I don't know, a month or two, but on and off, we'd still go out on ambushes. We'd go out in the area, do an ambush at night and that sort of thing.
So let's talk a little bit about the escorts you were doing. What was your role in that? Were you a gunner on
I was a gunner, M60. I was a gunner on the gun jeep.
And again, for those who are not familiar with that weapon system, tell us a little bit about the M60 and the capabilities of that weapon.
It's pretty powerful, actually. So you see, sometimes in World War II, they had 50 calibers on gun jeeps, but that's a little bit too much for a gun jeep, I would think. I wasn't on the machine gun very long because my sergeant assigned me to be a driver. So that's the last time I used a machine gun. That was it. When we were started on that.
So tell us about these patrols that your unit would go on, and I also don't think I caught it. What you're a headquarters company, Recon, was that the same unit that was doing the patrols as well, or is that a different unit?
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So tell us about how a patrol would work. Do you get intelligence on where to go? I mean, where do they want you to go?
When you're on the bottom of the totem pole, you just do what you're told. I mean, you don't know. I'm sure it was intelligence, probably, from the higher ups, checking out certain areas where they've had some problems, that sort of thing, So, yeah.
So walk us through what I hate to use the word average because I know that there is no such animal, but a typical or let's talk about your first one. Talk about your first patrol, if you recall it. What did that entail? How long were you out? How many guys are going with you? Give us some details on that.
The first patrol that I went on without the gun jeeps, as a patrol, our Recon unit, we went not very many meters outside of our base, and we set up an ambush at nighttime. That's what we do. We'd be out all night long, just set up an ambush on a trail looking for Charlie.
Is this a platoon size element or a squad, or how big of an element?
Platoon. We had about 18 in my platoon, something like that. Our Recon platoon, about 18 people.
And the first patrol you went on, did you have any contact?
No contact.
How long did it take when you were in country before you had contact with the enemy?
Probably 3 months, possibly 3 months, because normally we were. Well, what happened was we moved our base camp to a place called Bearcat, which is on Highway 15 toward Vung Tau. And so what we did, headquarters, our recon unit, we had to pull security while they're building it, while the Corps of Engineers were building the base camp, Bearcat.
Mhm.
So we had a little fire there. We'd run into a few VC, but other than that, no one was killed in my unit or wounded at that time. And so once they finished Bearcat, we were there at that base camp for probably 3 or 4 months or longer before we moved to another base camp.
But tell us what's going. The first time that you were involved with combat. You know, you read different things or you talk to different veterans, and they all have different takes on it. But does the training really take over, or do you actually have the time to think about the how volatile the situation you're in? I mean, what's an 18-year-old? What's going through an 18-year-old?
I think your training really helped you.
Mm-hmm.
I was well. What happened was we got deployed to go down to the Rungsat district, which is right near Vung Tau, the swamps, and the operation was called Baton Rouge. And you can see where they come up with the name. It was nothing but swamp. And so it was interesting how every now and then you go on an operation and they name it after something.
Mm-hmm.
Like Fort Riley, Kansas. There were towns around Fort Riley, Kansas. The Big Red One was. They would name a operation of about some town around Fort Riley.
Yeah.
But the Rungsat was, they'd already sprayed it with Agent Orange, the Rungsat area. They'd already sprayed the whole jungle, and it was all dead. And it was right near the South China Sea. So at night we could only stay in there for 72 hours because it was just nothing but mud. And we would actually set up ambushes on the little canals because the VC wouldn't think we'd be in there, because why would we be in there? You know, they take us in on gunboats, and all the way in there before they drop us off, they'd be shooting 50 caliber machine guns off both sides on the way in, just in case Charlie was, you know, nearby. And then we would get off the boat, and it was so bad with leeches, and we have to wade through water, and for 3 days, that's what we did, setting up operations. So it was pretty interesting. And one night, well, the thing about it is in daytime, everything looks sort of dry and you don't know where the tide is. You have no idea where the tide's coming from. So at nighttime, we set up, we think we're fine. And all of a sudden, about 3 in the morning, water comes in. You have to climb a tree or do something to get out of the water. And that happened several times to us because you didn't know exactly where we were going to be. And then one time we were there was a ship off the coast, was bombarding the coast, coming up the coast, firing into the jungle, and they almost got us. They got so close to us and we couldn't find out where fire was coming from. We kept calling people. We finally got in touch with somebody who stopped them hard. So that was interesting.
So you're in the middle of a swamp. I imagine land navigation has got to be terribly difficult. Is that your lieutenant that's doing that, or NCOs doing that, or were you doing land nav as well? How did that work?
No, we were our whole platoon was there. Mm-hmm. But when I was there, we still had some M14s. The guys didn't want to give up their M14s because M14 you could stomp it in the mud and still fire it. Yeah. M16s, they had a lot of problems with jamming and stuff like that. So the guys didn't want to give up their M14s, but my buddy Sergeant Spice, he kept his as long as he could, his M14. So they ended up using me as a radio operator for my lieutenant. And I started doing that. They wanted to give me a 45, and I said, no, I'm going to keep my M16. You know, I'm not going to travel that light. Yeah. So I kept my M16, even though I was a radio operator for the lieutenant. And on and off, I was probably radio operator for him for almost a year on and off. Probably 80% of the time I was his radio operator, and call sign was 29er. And the best thing about that, I knew what was going on, because you're with the lieutenant all the time. Yeah.
If I read right, he was killed later on. Is that right?
He was killed later on. Mm-hmm.
So you at this time, what was your rank? E3, E4,
E1,
E1, okay.
Whatever. Yeah.
So you're with the lieutenant. You get to see a view that a lot of guys lower enlisted don't get to see. So I'm assuming he's doing a lot of the land nav and obviously the communication. You're the radio man. Did you learn a lot from being by his side?
Yeah, I did. And he was a great leader. He wouldn't do anything, asked you to do anything he wouldn't do. So at one point, what we did, we trained on Chinooks to be deployed into the jungle, in an area in the jungle on an operation. So when we were in Vung Tau, we trained on Chinooks. So what we'd do, we'd go up rope ladders in the center of the Chinook and go out the back, down the back of the Chinook. And we did that several times before we actually went into the jungle on an operation. And what they did is they bombarded the jungle with artillery so that Chinook could get close enough to the ground so you could go out of the rope ladders into the jungle. And my lieutenant, Victoria, his name was Victoria, he would be the first one out. That's the most dangerous one, is you're the first one out, because if any Charlie's around, you get taken out pretty quick. So anyway, yeah. So he was a good guy.
Did you find that your NCOs were pretty capable as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, had great NCOs.
So if you don't mind sharing with us, tell us about the one of the battles that you were in that you did lose men in. Again, if you're comfortable with that, I don't want to push it.
Well, I can do that in a little bit. I was going to tell you, on the way, when we were getting ready to get on helicopters to go to the swamps, Rungsat swamps, and they ended up calling our unit the Swamp Rats. That was we became known as the Swamp Rats. The first of 18 Recon that I was in. It actually came up with a patch later on for the Swamp Rats patch. But we just cleared this village, and we were waiting on helicopters to take us back down to the swamps again. And so my Sergeant Malloy, who was also a Karen veteran from Seattle, Washington, we just cleared this village and we're walking out of the village, and he stepped on a landmine and blew his leg off. And I had just passed the same area that I was in front of him. So I was very fortunate that I didn't step on it. He never lost consciousness or anything. He was a really strong guy, old guy, but he was a good guy. And so,
situation like that, how long would it take to get a medevac to get him out?
Not too long, because we were in an area where a medevac could land easily, unlike other areas in Vietnam, because of the canopy cover, in the jungles. It's very difficult to find a dust off area.
Gotcha.
For medevacs.
And you said that Sergeant Malloy, he did survive his wounds?
Yes, he did survive. Yeah. And eventually we went down to the hospital in Saigon to see him before he shipped out. He said, he was just made a joke. He said, "Well, I told you guys I beat you home."
And how long into your deployment did this occur? Was this like 6 months in? Was it toward the end of your? Probably
about in the swamps that we worked.
Yeah, when Sergeant Malloy lost his leg?
Probably about 4 or 5 months into the year.
Gotcha.
Around March.
Gotcha.
March or April, something like that.
So let's talk a little bit about when you're not on patrol. Where are you staying? And tell us a little bit about the living conditions at your base camp.
We were back at our base camp. It was just intense because there were no buildings. When we first got to Vietnam, only people who had buildings eventually were pilots and that sort of thing. All the soldiers, you're intense, and it's hot. It's hot. no bathrooms, outside bathrooms. Everything was like kind of
Definitely
different,
roughing it.
kind of roughing it. Yeah, you're right.
What did you guys do for entertainment? I saw that you were one of the lucky guys to
Well,
see Bob Hope.
I did go see Bob Hope, went to his Christmas show in Christmas of 1965, and did get to see him. And years later, I got to meet him, and he autographed my yearbook from Vietnam.
Oh, that's cool.
And got a picture with him, so that was kind of neat.
Hey, a little off topic. Which VIPs do you not have a photo of you with? I see
not very many.
I constantly see you with presidents and all these other VIPs.
Yeah,
you have quite the collection.
Yeah. So anyway, what was I going to tell you? We were going back to what the Rung Sot, and after that, we did operations all along. When we had gun jeeps, we took the gun jeeps with us on some operations south of our base camp toward Vung Tau. Several times we did that. And then we also, at one point, we put our gun jeeps on caribous, a caribou aircraft. You know what a caribou is?
I'm not familiar.
Caribou is an airplane that can almost land and take off in no distance at all. It's a very, very short runway plane, basically. So we would put our jeeps on caribous and take them on an operation out in the jungle. One time, my sergeant, we were on an operation, and B-52s were going to bomb like a mile from us, our location. And they made us basically dig a foxhole and bury the jeep in a hole, just in case. And the day that they did the bombing, if you looked up, you saw the planes go over, you looked up and you see the bombs coming down, it looked like they're coming straight at you. Obviously they weren't, but it was rolling thunder. Once they started the bombs started hitting, not about a mile from us or 2 miles from us. It was pretty loud.
I imagine a mile's not that good. I imagine a mile's not a lot of distance when you're talking about B-52s laying down.
No.
Wow.
Another thing, I just keep reminding me of things, but when we went on the first assault on helicopters into the jungle on an operation, like 15, 20 helicopters, whatever. So anyway, we get out of the helicopter, jump out of the helicopter, and in the wood line, the artillery is hitting in the wood line. And I asked my sergeant, I said, when's that going to hit? He said, that'll stop before you get there. Don't worry about it.
And did it?
Yeah, it'll stop before you get there. I said, that's good to know.
So the helicopter operations, did you train on that in the United States prior to going there? You had to learn how to do it right there, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And I wasn't aware that the first infantry did a lot of that.
They did a lot.
You always think 101st doing a lot of that.
Yeah, I rode on the helicopter a lot of times, all over Vietnam.
Gotcha.
And we worked on some of our operations were north of Saigon. It's called Highway 13. They call it the Bloody 13, which is the toughest area for the VC. Encounter the VC. So at one point, we were on an operation, and I don't know how many people. I didn't kill anybody on that particular one, but our other units in front of us did. And so that night, there was like dead VCs all around us where we slept that night. And my Sergeant Vasquez, they had one of the VC was in a foxhole, and they kept trying to get him out. So every time he'd throw a grenade in, he'd throw the guy throw it back out. The VC would. So finally, they got him.
Mm-hmm.
So and then wait a minute, I've got to think of one more thing. And so at one point, they sent me and 5 other guys on a operation up near the Cambodian border, just a small Recon patrol. Dropped us off. A sergeant was with, we had one sergeant with us. And so we were out there for about 4 or 5 days, and we were waiting to get picked up. We actually, we caught a VC, we captured him. And so we were gonna bring him back to camp when we got back to base. So we called for helicopters to pick us up. The helicopter came in, the pilot had only been in Vietnam, not very long. So he came in to pick us up, and he hit a tree with the rotor blade. And so we had no choice but to get on it, basically. And so we got the VC on the helicopter with us. We took off, and the helicopter was vibrating so bad, I didn't know if we'd make it back or not. And it was pretty bad.
What kind of fire would you guys receive from the ground when you're in these helicopters? Was that constant?
Small arms fire, just small arms fire, yeah.
And what was that effective fire? I mean, was your helicopter being struck frequently?
No, well, they were shot down a couple times. We had to go recover this guy, pilot who was shot down, not far from us, and so we had to go out and get him and protect him, and but he survived the crash on the helicopter crash. He survived that. So,
gotcha. When you think about your time in service overseas, is there a particular incident that stands out in your mind, whether it was a memorable experience, scary experience, even funny experience? What experiences do you pop in your mind when you think of Vietnam?
We were up near the Cambodian border, and this was my last patrol in Vietnam, very last patrol. And my Lieutenant Victoria, I'd always been his radio operator. And he said, well, what happened was we were at a base camp, and General Hollingsworth from Texas A&M guy, flies in, and he takes some fire from the ground on the way into our base camp. So he said, I want you to send a patrol out to find out where that fire is coming from. So the next morning, they sent our unit out, our recon platoon out. And so Lieutenant Victoria, he told me, he said, Boatright, he said, you're leaving in 2 days. I'm going to get another radio operator, and you can be in the back of the column with Sergeant Green. So he got a new radio operator for that day. But the thing about it was, not just me, 2 days left, he only had 10 days left in Vietnam. Had 10 days he was leaving. So when we went out, our unit got ambushed. There was like a village of VC that we ran into, and they were we had 3 people killed. My lieutenant got shot with small arms fire. He eventually died. We thought we could get him out of there without that he lived, but he died. And Sergeant Bass from Florida, he was the point guy, and he got hit right in his M16 with a rifle grenade, killed him instantly. And another guy got shot, and he died the next day. And we had like eight wounded and 3 dead from that operation. So what they did was they asked after the lieutenant got shot, Sergeant Green and I was his radio operator, went up to take over. And so when we went up there, we were trying to, as soon as we got up near the lieutenant, we were standing there, and an RPG came in and hit right in front of us, about 10 feet away, and didn't go off. That's a dud. So I could have been, I probably wouldn't be here if the thing, God really protected me on that. So, and they had several duds, but the problem of it was we couldn't get a dust off because of the foliage. So, the canopy in the jungle. And so we were trying to get them we called in airstrikes almost on top of us because we couldn't get artillery support right away. So we just called in airstrikes. So it was really close to us. And then and then to get the dust off, the smoke grenades, when you put down smoke grenades, it wouldn't go up through the foliage enough so that helicopters coming in to try to figure exactly where we were couldn't find it. So my sergeant found a clearing, and we were already out of smoke grenades. So he found a clearing, and he takes the big, huge map he had out and was waving it in the clearing. So they finally saw him from the helicopter did, so they could figure out how we're going to do a dust off to get our guys out of there. And in the meantime, they were sending Bravo Company from our main base of where we were working out of, Bravo Company. They sent them out to help us out, on the way, whatever. So it was tough. It was a tough time. I thought my last patrol.
Yeah, just 2 days before you're being shipped out.
Yeah, and another sad thing about that was I left almost like the next day or 2 days, and there was no time to be around your guys that you've been working with for a year. You're gone. They pick you up, and you didn't have time to grieve. Basically, it was kind of just one of those things. You don't have a choice.
Terrible. So, Scotty, forgive me if I missed it. The soldier that replaced you, was he one of the 3 that was killed?
No.
Okay.
No, he was not. But I got to thinking about that. I don't know where I would have been.
Yeah.
You don't know where you would have been.
Yeah.
That would be right with him. He got shot twice. My lieutenant did. So you never know where you would actually been. But he thought enough of me to say, you need to.
Yeah. Wow.
Go ahead, take a break.
Terrible. So let's talk a little bit about how did you communicate with your family when you were overseas?
Well, I went to Tokyo. Mainly letters. We just write letters. That's the only communication he had.
Yeah.
There's no phone, phone system. He couldn't call. So when I went to Tokyo for R&R in March, I think it was. I can't remember exactly when I went over there. So when I went to Tokyo, I got to call my parents and my grandparents, and that was it. It's the only communication by phone we had in a year.
Yeah,
that was it, except for letters. Now it's a little bit different, obviously.
Oh yeah, yeah, no doubt. So a lot of times your grandkids and all that, they might be interested in other issues like things like how did you eat? What kind of food were they feeding you guys over there?
Sea rations. Most of the time we had sea rations. No MREs.
Tell your kids what a sea ration, your grandkids what sea rations are.
not very good. The worst sea ration that we had was lima beans. No one loved lima beans. That was the worst.
On the recreation side, did you guys have like a local bar that you guys could
not really. Not really. They gave you actually cigarettes and beer when you're at base camp. You had access to beer or cigarettes. And not very many places you could go to actually, unless you went to Saigon. But most people, when I was there, I'm going to tell you a little thing about. We had movies, outdoor movies that they would play back at base camp.
Yeah.
Every now and then, whatever. And so when I went to Tokyo, when I got back, someone had broken into my locker and stole all the pictures that I had taken the first 4 months in Vietnam. I have no idea who did it. So the pictures I took were all slides, and what you do is you take the slides and you send the film to Hawaii to have it processed. And then so I still have a lot of pictures that I took over there, but I lost some good ones that I'd taken when I first got there and all that. So
your love of photography dates all the way back to the 60s, huh?
That's the first camera I ever had, was a Canon Sure Shot, and I bought that at a PX in Guam or someplace on the way over there, I think it was. So
Still have it?
no, I wish I did. No,
Yeah,
no,
that was a heck.
don't still have it. No. No. So the pictures, our tent, everybody had a locker, foot locker, and with a lock on it. And so I have no idea who. Somebody who probably left already, had left when it takes, knew I had a lot of pictures and took some.
Yeah.
So he didn't have any, so he took mine. So
Let's talk about your homecoming. When did you tell us about how you got back to the United States and when you first saw your family again?
I went to, when I processed out, I had Thanksgiving dinner in Saigon and at Thompson Newt Air Force Base before I flew out. Thanksgiving dinner. I still have the menu and everything. I save a lot of stuff. I save a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, I still have the menu and what we ate and all that kind of thing. And the prayer was on the back of the menu. And so anyway, so the best feeling I had was when the plane lifted off. That was off of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And then you made it. Basically, you're safe. You made it. So I flew to McGuire Air Force Base, New Jersey. That's where we actually landed. I don't know where we stopped. How many places we stopped, but that's where I ended up. Was McGuire, and I took a plane from Pittsburgh to Bristol, Tennessee, because that's where my parents lived, near Bristol, Tennessee. And my cousin picked me up. And we went straight to my grandparents' house, and my mom and dad were there. And it was kind of neat being home because I'd been gone 18 months, at least 18 months, because after I left home, after basic, I never saw them again until I got home from Vietnam. Yep.
So in interviewing other Vietnam veterans, I've heard tales of mistreatment by American citizens on their return. I've heard other veterans say they never had any bad experiences at all. What were your experiences?
I really didn't have a bad experience because this was kind of early on in the war. It wasn't like later on when they had all the protests and everybody hated the Vietnam veterans and all that stuff. So I didn't really experience that. And I wore my uniform, on the way back, all the way home. And I didn't have any mistreatments myself. Good. Yeah. So I felt that was good.
So when did you ETS? When did you get out of service?
June of 1968, when I was in the old guard.
Let's talk a little bit about the old guard. We had the privilege to go up to Arlington a few months ago and interviewed a whole bunch of the Sentinels up there. Tell us a little bit about how you landed in that unit and what your responsibilities were there.
Well, when I'd put in, they give you a choice when you're in Vietnam. You can put in for your closest unit near your home. And so I put in for Fort Campbell, Kentucky, because that's, closest to where I lived, my parents lived. So I put in Fort Campbell. And then, so what happened was they sent me to Fort Myer. I'd never heard of Fort Myer, really, to tell you the truth, not much about it. So the old guard. So that's what I did. So when I got there, they assigned me to first platoon. And the first platoon, what you do in the first platoon, you go to if there's a foreign dignitary that comes to the White House, you have a branch or a platoon for each branch of service lined up out in front of the White House, all branches of service and the joint color team. And so you stand out there, you're burning up. But anyway, so here I am, country boy. I'm standing out there representing the United States Army in front of the White House. Kind of cool, Did
you find that you were one of the few combat veterans that was
a lot of combat veterans that were in the old guard? Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, a lot was in the old guard.
So how long did you serve with the old guard?
18 months.
You enjoy that assignment?
Well, some of it I did. So the biggest thing was we had to protect the Pentagon during the war protest at the Pentagon. We had to, during the Martin Luther King riots, we had to go down to the city and protect the city, guard stores and arrest people, try to, just take clothing away from people stealing it. And we were assigned to the second precinct, which was near 6th and 7th Street, which was the worst part they burned in the city. So it was one of those things that, it was kind of dangerous, really. It was a rough time for the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna ask a couple questions. Then I also, normally we just focus on military service, but I do want to get a little bit into your public service afterwards, because I do see a nexus between the two. So if you had a young man or a woman approach you and they knew you were a veteran, like you're wearing your shirt today, you're at a mall or something, somebody said, "Hey, I'm interested in joining the U.S. Army." What advice would you give them to be successful in the military?
Well, see, right now, everybody, you get more respect for whatever reason. I wear my big red one hat a lot, when I'm out, and everybody says, "Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service." And so I've never really had any, you should be proud of it, but you got to be proud of what you did. And I've never had any really people give me a hard time or anything about it, about my uniform or about wearing a shirt or hat or whatever. So.
What advice would you give to a kid who's going to enlist on how to succeed in the military?
Well, the biggest thing is, biggest thing is do what you're told. You can't complain about, you don't complain about anything. Not going to help you at all. We're not going to help you by complaining.
Yeah.
Well, another thing was, I was going to tell you, I remember exactly where it was. I had my 19th birthday in Vietnam. My 19th birthday. And so most people, they're doing other things when they're 19.
Yeah. Do you remember what you were doing on that day?
We were on a patrol. That's all I remember exactly where we were walking on this patrol, but it was my birthday. So yeah, I do remember.
So I mentioned earlier before we started recording that I recommend that you send a copy of the video to the Library of Congress of the Veterans History Project, and your video will be there theoretically thousands of years from now, and one of your great grandkids might stumble upon the video.
Yeah,
what would you want them to know about your service to your country?
Oh, I really am fortunate that I was able to do all the service I did for the country, for the police department, the fire department, the old guard, especially the old guard. I'm a life member of the Old Guard Association. I go to the reunions. I still keep in touch with my first sergeant in the Old Guard. I keep in touch with him. He lives down in South Carolina. And there's two, and I still keep in touch with two members of my platoon from Vietnam. One lives in Georgia, and the other one lives in Texas. And one in Texas, he got wounded in one operation we were on. But yeah, I would just say that I'm proud of what I did, and it wasn't all about me, how I didn't really do anything. It's just how things happen, and you don't. As far as the police department was, when I was in the Old Guard, my uncle's the provost marshal at Fort Meade when I went to the Old Guard when I first got there. So he said, "What are you going to do when you get out?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, I saw in the back of the newspaper, the Washington Star, that Fairbanks County Police is hiring and 20-year retirement." And I'm thinking, okay, same as the military. So I'd be better off probably doing that. And the salary wasn't that bad. So I ended up joining the department in December 1968 is when I actually started. December the 2nd is when I started with the police department.
And what year did you retire, Scotty?
1992. And out of my, what I'm proud of my, well, what I enjoyed the most with the police department was when I was a crime scene investigator for 10 years, that because I learned a lot doing that. I became a fingerprint expert and all that, a lot of stuff I did, and proud of all that. Putting bad guys away. I mean, that's what you want to do. So
What other units were you with the PD?
I was in my first patrol was at headquarters, and this before they opened the Chantilly station. And so we had my area that I worked was from south of Herndon all the way to West Springfield, through Clifton, all the way to West Springfield.
Mm.
And so I remember when they landed on the moon, I went to stopped at the firehouse at Clifton to watch them land on the moon when they went down the ladder. That's where I was.
That's cool. Did you find that your combat experience helped you in police work?
Yeah, probably a little bit, because it's all, you're serious about what you're doing. You got to really, I think, because a lot of departments hire military, ex-military people because they're disciplined. They do what they're told. They have a respect for the law. So I think it makes a big difference.
Is there anything else you wanted to capture about your military service?
No, I just I think that when I was after Vietnam, I was so excited to get home. But after Vietnam, I tried to keep in touch with some of my guys over there, but it was difficult then because there's no Facebook, there's nothing.
Yeah.
You didn't get a guy's address when you left. You don't know if he's going to go home, go get stationed somewhere else. And so you never find, you can't find your friends. So I found a few just by doing Googling, stuff like that. And most of the guys that was in my unit, one guy got wounded when on that operation. We got one of the guys that got wounded when my lieutenant died. I found about 4 of them, and they're all dead. All of them died a couple years ago, 3 years ago. Some of them were older than me because I was 18, so it was a big difference. Some of them were like 26, 27 years old. So now they would be like in their 80s.
Yeah.
Or near 80. So, yeah. So I was going to tell you that one thing I did in the old guard. I made sergeant in the old guard. And when I went to sergeant's board, they asked you a million questions about Arlington Cemetery, where all these famous people are buried, and you had to know a lot about the cemetery. So in my platoon, we had, in the old guard, we had the Fife and Drum Corps, we had the Tomb Guards, and at that point we had JFK guards in 68, had JFK guards to guard the flame. And the other one was, let's see, drill team. The U.S. Army drill team was also in our barracks, and we had our own cafeteria. And so now there's only one place where they all eat, in the old guard, whatever. But my last job was Robert Kennedy's funeral. It's the last job I did. And so what was interesting about that was they had a memorial service in New York, came down, and I don't know why they had to bury him the same day, but they buried him the same day. And so it was the only night funeral ever in Arlington Cemetery, was his funeral. It was dark. Only night funeral ever. So that was kind of interesting. So I was part of that. So part of that.
Very cool. Well, Scotty, I can't thank you enough for spending about an hour with us today. And more importantly, thank you for your service.
Okay, I'd like to mention one other thing.
Please.
When I retired from the police department, I went to work for the fire department for 16 years.
Yeah.
As a civilian. And I was 9/11 at the Pentagon with our rescue team, and I took all the aerial photos that week for the FBI.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I
let's
have
talk a little bit about that. We capture stories about 9/11. So, where were you when you heard about the attack?
I was in the Massey building there at work, and so the rescue. I was with the rescue team. I didn't go down with the rescue team, but I went down. Got there about 1 in the afternoon on 9/11, about 1 o'clock, and so our rescue team asked me if I'd go up in a helicopter, take pictures so we could figure out how far the plane went into the Pentagon. And so I went up in the helicopter and took pictures, digital pictures, and downloaded them when I came down so they could see what the damage was from above. And so I did that.
Was that on Fairfax 1, or was it a different type of air?
Fairfax 1. I did that with Fairfax 1. But after that, the FBI asked me to go up every day in the Park Police helicopter for every day that week. And I have all the photos. I went up every day and I photographed the changes, how they were taking, the debris, tearing the building apart. And they were taking everything, putting it in the north parking lot. North parking lot, what they did was they take a pile and then they had dogs out there, and then they start separating building parts, plane parts, and body parts with the dogs if they found any body parts.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I took pictures for the FBI and gave them the film, but I also took my own pictures at the same time. So that's how I ended up with a lot of extra photos that I wouldn't have had.
Very cool.
Because of that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of.
So on 9/11, we several years ago we interviewed one of the guys was on Fairfax 1. I forget his name. Is Fairfax? I can't remember if he was a pilot. Do you recall who the crew was by chance when on Fairfax 1?
I know who you're talking about. Let me see.
His videos on our webpage. Oh man, what is his name? Anyway, it'd be interesting if you were on
the. I think he's retired now. I think he is. I'm pretty sure.
I interviewed him probably about 7 years ago. It was a while back. Interesting.
He was the only one flying that day.
Yeah, if I remember right, they said that they were on.
He was the only one. Him and the lady, I can't think of her name now. She was on the helicopter with him.
Gotcha.
And so
that's interesting.
But what was interesting was when I went up in Fairfax 1 to do that, if you think about it, we were the only ones flying in all of the United States, because that time they already shut down all the aircraft, And so when we were there that afternoon, every now and then you'd find some pilot was out flying around without any good communications, and what he would do, they would think he was going to come and bomb the building, hit the building again. So they said, evacuate, take everybody out of the building, all the rescue guys. So anyway, so I do a presentation on 9/11. I've done it here a couple of times with all my photos, talk about it.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, outstanding. Is there anything else you wanted to capture?
No, like I said.
So
I've done so many crazy things.
I know you have.
Been fortunate to be part of all that,
Yeah.
Part of history. Well, I worked on the Korean War Memorial for 8 years. I did work on I photographed that for 8 years when I was commander of the VFW in Fairfax, and we hosted an event to kick off the building of the memorial. And that's how I ended up meeting Bob Hope and all these other famous people, because I worked on the Korean War Memorial, doing all the photography for the building of the memorial itself for like 8 years.
Very cool.
And dedication was in 1996. That's when dedication was of the memorial. So
that's a great memorial.
Yeah, met a lot of nice people doing that.
Yeah, I bet you did. I bet you did. Well, thanks again, Scotty.